So, Bhakti Yoga by Jim Gasch. So Bhakti Yoga is one of the four paths to finding God. All it requires is an open heart and a loving heart. And for one to acquire a loving and open heart, he needs to dispose of all his doubts, fears, and just express his love towards God. It is much like the Trinity. God is much like the Trinity in this case. How in the Trinity, God is one being with three parts. But through Bhakti Yoga, there are more than three. There are 33,000 deities, but only one being. So 33,000 rather than three. And Bhakti Yoga can be compared to animals, as baby animals get transported by their mothers. It differs in the responsibility of whether it's the baby's responsibility to hold on to the mother or the mother's responsibility to hold on to the baby. So in other yogas, such as jhana, it is the yogi's responsibility to find God, just as the baby monkey clings to its mother as she transports it through the trees. But in bhakti, the yogi only needs to relax and be open to God, just as a baby kitten is as its mother transports it by carrying it by the neck. So where does bhakti come from? Bhakti yoga stems from the word bhaj, meaning to be attached to God. And there are different classifications of bhakti yoga. The Sakamira versus the Nishkamra. The Sakamira is being devoted towards God in order to gain wealth. So this is someone who prays to God just in order to acquire new things or good status in life or a good relationship. And the Nishkamya is being devoted to God because he has already given you enough good enough status in life. So this is one who thanks God for what he has been given, even if it is a little amount compared to someone who is richer. Should be thankful for everything that we have been given. And another pairing of classifications is the Apara Bhakti versus the Para Bhakti. The Apara Bhakti is known as the beginner's form of yoga, but of Bhakti yoga. And while this is not necessarily a bad thing, it is how one first expresses his love towards God in the beginning. It uses very ornate rituals with chimes and other bells and statues and other ornate displays in order to show his devotion. And Para Bhakti yoga is the highest form of Bhakti yoga. And one who is in this state sees the Lord in everything, and only the Lord in everything, everything. So how does Bhakti yoga work? Bhakti yoga is the path to being unified with God, which focuses on love and devotion towards the Lord. And as one becomes unified with God, their love and devotion toward God grows as they come to know Him better. Bhakti yoga is used to purify the mind, and only when the mind is pure can one be unified. And while many people have aspirations of success, wealth, good relationships, these are all very natural, but they're also very basic. However, it is a great blessing. The best quality that anyone can have is to have a longing for God. And this longing for God is the framework of Bhakti yoga. So there are 9 principles of Bhakti yoga, and they're ways that people can experience God through Bhakti. Here they are. The Sravarnar, it the Sanskrit term for listening to poets or stories about God's virtues and mighty deeds. This cannot be done individually, as listening takes someone to tell stories to. Usually, people will hear these stories from wise teachers or from other holy people. The next activity is the kirtana, which is the singing or chanting of God's praises. The next is smarana, the remembrance of God at all time. The next, pada sevana, the expression of love toward God through service, especially the sick. The arcana, the worship of God through such external images as icons or religious pictures, or through internal visualizations. The purpose of this activity is to purify the heart through the love of God. The vandana, the prayer or prostration, and this is intended to curb self-absorption and self-centeredness. The dasya, the mindset that we are all God's servants, and we are here to do what God wishes for us to do. The sakha bhava, the cultivation of friendship love towards God. The friendship love is something similar towards something similar to the love of a friend or a family member. And finally, the Atma Nivedana, the complete self-offering or self-suffering towards God. So why don't more people practice Bhakti Yoga? Some people argue that Bhakti is old-fashioned, and this comes from many misrepresentations of Bhakti Yoga on television or in movies. But in reality, all of the yogas are part of the same tradition, and they stem from about the same time. So they're actually pretty old. So I guess they are all old-fashioned. Also, some people say that Bhakti is for the non-intellectuals. This is because that you can interpret the scriptures to mean that Bhakti functions without knowledge or brilliance. However, this is an incorrect interpretation of scriptures, as one should understand that reasoning is not required for Bhakti, just as love and devotion is not required for jhana yoga. So it is not a requirement, but it will work better if one uses some amount of reasoning behind their practice, their prayers during practicing of Bhakti Yoga. Also, a very weak argument, in my opinion, is that Bhakti takes too much time. And this comes from when you begin anything new, you'll encounter problems, like not exactly knowing what you're doing, so that will take longer to figure it out. However, this shouldn't be an excuse, because if you are very bad at planning and begin your prayers when you should be leaving for work or some other prior engagement, the people will not take that as a good excuse, because you should have planned your prayer time and scheduled it where you have nothing else for a long time, so you can complete your prayers. So what is Bhakti not? Though Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of love and devotion, it is not the same kind of love that is expressed during Valentine's Day or similar times. It does not revolve around the romantic love that is shown during this February holiday. It is not a type of love. It is not the type of love described by the Greek word eros, but more the word philia or agape, meaning brotherly love or unconditional love. And it is through this experience of unconditional brotherly love that we find God. We find God through the love of others, self, and most importantly, through the love of God. So how does Bhakti Yoga relate to me? Bhakti Yoga relates to me through the Catholic ideal of God's unconditional love. I understand that God will love me and the rest of His creation without depending on anything. However, the people on earth will never truly fully experience Him if we have hardened hearts. If I want to experience God, I must be open to Him, just as those who practice Bhakti Yoga must be fully devoted and open to His works. So what does Bhakti Yoga illustrate about the Hindu faith? One thing that I believe that the Bhakti Yoga illustrates about the Hindu faith is the individuality of the religion. The Hindu faith has four main ways to find God, and in Bhakti, at least, there are 9 activities that can be used to practice this yoga. It shows the how, though the people can use different paths, they all lead to the same place, God. And there's my bibliography. Thank you for watching this screencast.